Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Decay had Decay but better than Tomura Shigaraki? Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The world is not built equally. Some are born to build, to weave light into the sky, to lift heavy burdens with a smile, or to breathe life into the cold earth. And some, Izuku Midoriya learned at the tender age of 4, are born to turn it all to dust. It didn't happen with a bang, or a flash of light, or the triumphant cheer that accompanied Katsuki Bakugo's first explosion. It happened on a Tuesday, under the weeping shade of a ginkgo tree in the neighborhood park. The afternoon sun was filtered through the leaves, dappling the ground in gold and shadow. Izuku was running, his red sneakers pounding against the pavement, chasing a butterfly that danced just out of reach. He was laughing. It was a pure, bubbling sound, the sound of a child who believed the world was soft. He tripped. It was a clumsy, toddler stumble over an exposed root. His hand shot out instinctively to break his fall, palms slapping hard against the wooden slats of the park bench painted a cheerful, municipal green. He expected the sting of impact. He expected the scrape of wood. Instead, he felt a sudden, sickening hollow. It wasn't a sound. It was a sensation that traveled up his arms, a vibration that felt like the hum of a dying fluorescent light. Beneath his small, chubby fingers, the green paint didn't just chip, it grayed. The color was sucked away in a heartbeat, replaced by the dull, lifeless brown of dead timber. Then, the wood groaned. It was a sound of agony, of years of weathering happening in a split second. The sturdy slats, which had held the weight of tired mothers and elderly couples for a decade, disintegrated. They didn't explode, they simply gave up. The wood turned to dry rot, then to splinters, and finally to a coarse, gray powder. Izuku fell through the bench. He landed on the dirt below, coughing as a cloud of fine sawdust billowed around him. He sat up, blinking tears from his eyes, confused. He looked at his hands. They were trembling. There was a faint, black aura drifting off his skin, like smoke from a snuffed candle. Izuku? His mother's voice was high, laced with the panic that only mothers know. Inko Midoriya dropped her grocery bags, eggs cracking on the asphalt, and rushed toward him. I fell, Mama, Izuku whimpered, holding his hands up. The bench, it broke. Inko froze. She was 3 feet away, her arms reaching out to scoop him up, but she stopped. She looked at the bench. A perfect semicircle had been carved out of the wood, mirroring the span of Izuku's arms. The edges weren't jagged, they were smooth, worn down as if eroded by a century of wind and rain. She looked at the black mist curling around her son's fingers. Izuku, she whispered, her voice trembling. Don't touch anything else. That was the first time Izuku saw fear in his mother's eyes. It wasn't fear for him. It was fear of him. The doctor's office smelled of antiseptic and lemon cleaner. It was a sterile smell, one that Izuku would come to associate with bad news. Dr. Tsubasa was a round man with thick goggles and a mustache that twitched when he spoke. He sat in his chair, looking at the x-rays, then at the petri dish on his desk where a steel ball bearing had been reduced to a pile of rust in under 10 seconds. It's fascinating, the doctor muttered, though his tone suggested he meant horrifying. Absolutely fascinating. Inko sat with her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Izuku was sitting on the examination table, wearing a pair of oversized mittens the nurse had hastily provided. He felt small. He felt like he had done something wrong, even though he had just been sitting there. Is he okay? Inko asked, her voice thin. Physically? He's in peak health, Dr. Tsubasa said, swiveling his chair around. His quirk, however, is a rare breed. We see emitter types all the time: fire, water, energy. But this isn't just emission. It's manipulation of a fundamental law. Law? Entropy, the doctor said, tapping the desk. The tendency of the universe to move toward disorder. Things break down, Mrs. Midoriya. Iron rusts, wood rots, flesh withers. It usually takes time. Years. Centuries. Your son. He gestured to Izuku. He accelerates that process. He commands it. Izuku looked at his mittened hands. Entropy. It was a big word. It sounded scary. Can he turn it off? Inko asked. Based on our tests? No. Not entirely, the doctor sighed. It appears to be touch-activated, primarily through the 5 fingers of the hand, though there's significant leakage through the palm. It's psychosomatic, linked to his emotional state. If he's calm, the effect is slow, like leaving bread out to mold. If he's distressed. The doctor glanced at the pile of rust that used to be a steel ball. Well, you saw? So it's like decay? Inko whispered, the word tasting like bile. Better. Or worse, depending on how you look at it, the doctor corrected. Decay usually implies a messy breakdown of bonds. This is precise aging. He can wither a flower without crushing it. He can rust a lock without breaking the door. But make no mistake, Mrs. Midoriya. The doctor leaned forward, his goggles reflecting the terrified face of the 4-year-old boy. This is a dangerous power. In the wrong hands, or without strict control, he is a walking biohazard. The Hero Commission tracks quirks like this. You'll need to register him immediately, not as a civilian quirk, but as a Class A hazardous emitter. Hazardous. Izuku shrank back. He wanted to reach out for his mom, to have her hold him, but he remembered the bench. He remembered the wood turning to dust. He pulled his hands into his chest, burying them in his shirt. Can I still be a hero? Izuku asked, his voice barely a squeak. The room went silent. Dr. Tsubasa looked at the boy, then at the mother. He didn't laugh. He didn't scoff. He just looked sad. Kid, the doctor said softly. Heroes save people. They build society up. Your power, it's made to take things apart. You might want to look into demolition. Or hazmat disposal. But a hero? He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't have to. The silence was loud enough. By the time Izuku turned 10, the mittens had been replaced by custom-ordered gloves. They were ugly things, thick, black rubber lined with a lead-woven fabric that dampened the emitter waves of his skin. They made his hands sweat constantly. He couldn't feel the texture of paper when he wrote, or the warmth of a teacup. His world was muffled, separated from him by 3 millimeters of industrial insulation. But the gloves were necessary. Because without them, things died. His classmates learned quickly. Children, for all their innocence, possess a sharp, primal instinct for survival. In kindergarten, when other kids manifested quirks, floating objects, extending fingers, small explosions, they were celebrated. They played tag. They roughhoused. Izuku sat alone on the swing set, gripping the chains with his padded hands. They called him Deku, but the nickname carried a weight it hadn't in another life. It wasn't just useless. It was a warning. Deku the defective. Deku the destroyer. Don't get near him, a boy whispered during recess. My mom said if he touches you, your skin falls off. I heard he killed his dog, another lied. Izuku kept his head down, staring at his notebook. He hadn't killed a dog. He hadn't killed anything alive. He was so careful. He moved through the world like it was made of glass, and he was made of hammers. Then there was Katsuki Bakugu. Katsuki was the king of the playground. He was loud, brash, and gifted with a quirk that was pure, destructive power. Explosions were flashy. They were heroic. They were akin to All Might's thunderous smashes. But Katsuki was smart. And Katsuki was afraid. It happened behind the school building when they were 11. Izuku had stumbled upon Katsuki, and his lackeys cornering a first-year student. It was the usual bullying, Katsuki demanding respect, popping small explosions in his palm to intimidate. "Stop it, Kaken!" Izuku had cried out, his voice trembling but his feet planted firm. Katsuki spun around, eyes narrowing. "Ha! The hell do you want, Deku? Leave him alone." That's not what heroes do," Katsuki sneered. "And what would you know about heroes? You're a walking disease." He stepped forward, expecting Izuku to flinch. Usually, the extras flinched, but Izuku didn't. He took a step forward. He raised his hands. It was a defensive gesture, meant to say stop, but the sunlight caught the black rubber of his gloves. Katsuki flinched. It was a micro-movement. A twitch of the eye, a stutter in his step. Katsuki Bakugu, the boy who feared nothing, recoiled from the outstretched hand of the quirkless loser. Silence stretched between them, heavy and suffocating. Katsuki realized what he had done. He realized he had shown weakness. His face twisted into a mask of rage. "Don't you dare!" Katsuki screamed, launching himself backward with an explosion, putting distance between them. "Don't you think you can touch me with those freaky hands? I'll kill you! I'll blast you to pieces before you get within 10 feet. I wasn't going to." "Shut up!" Katsuki roared, sweat beading on his forehead. "Stay away from me. You're a glitch. You shouldn't even exist." From that day on, the bullying changed. It wasn't physical anymore. Katsuki never punched him, never shoved him. He blasted his desk from across the room. He burned his notebooks. He attacked with words and ranged explosions, maintaining a strict perimeter of safety. It was a lonely existence, being a monster that even the bullies were afraid to touch. Age 14. Aldera Junior High. The classroom was buzzing with the restless energy of final-year students. The teacher stood at the podium, holding a stack of career aptitude forms. He looked tired. "So," the teacher droned, tapping the papers against the desk. "You're all third years now. It's time to think about your future." He paused, a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. "But I know you all want to go into the hero course." He threw the papers into the air. The class erupted. Quirks flashed everywhere, eyes stretching, hands turning to rock, water floating in the air. It was a display of individuality, of potential. Yes, you all have wonderful quirks," the teacher said, waving them down. "But remember, public quirk usage is against the law. Settle down." "Hey, teach!" Katsuki's voice cut through the noise. He was leaning back in his chair, feet on the desk, looking like he owned the place. "Don't lump me in with these extras. I'm the only one here with a shot at the big leagues." "I'm going to UA," the class murmured, a mix of annoyance and awe. UA was the peak. The insurmountable mountain. "Ah, yes, Bakugu," the teacher nodded. "You have excellent grades and a powerful quirk. You're aiming for the top." Katsuki grinned, basking in the attention. "I'm gonna surpass All Might. I'm going to be the richest, most famous hero of all time." "Oh, that reminds me," the teacher said, glancing at his clipboard. He didn't look up as he spoke, his tone casually cruel. "Midoriya applies for UA as well, didn't he?" The reaction was instantaneous. In a normal world, perhaps they would have laughed. They would have mocked the quirkless boy for dreaming too big. But Izuku wasn't quirkless. The room went dead silent. Every head turned. 40 pairs of eyes fixed on the boy sitting in the back corner. Izuku was hunched over, his gloved hands gripping the edge of his desk so hard the rubber creaked. "UA?" someone whispered. "With that quirk? He'll kill someone during the entrance exam," another muttered. "They won't let him in. It's a liability." Katsuki stiffened. He didn't turn around. His shoulders were rigid, smoke curling from his palms. "Deku," he growled, the sound low and dangerous. After class, the confrontation was inevitable. But it wasn't a fight. It was an interrogation. Izuku was packing his bag, his movements quick and jerky. He wanted to leave. He wanted to get home, lock his door, and write in his analysis notebook where the world made sense. Katsuki slammed his hand onto Izuku's desk. An explosion crackled, scorching the wood. Izuku flinched, looking up. Katsuki loomed over him, flanked by 2 lackeys who stayed a respectful distance back. "We need to talk, Deku." I have to go, Kaken," Izuku stammered, clutching his yellow backpack. "UA?" Katsuki's voice was shaking. "You're actually applying to UA?" It's always been my dream. It's a suicide mission," Katsuki shouted, his composure cracking. "And not just for you. What are you gonna do, huh? The robots? Sure, maybe you rot them. But the rescue points? The teamwork? You touch a civilian and they lose an arm. You touch a villain and they turn to dust. You aren't a hero, Deku. You're a weapon waiting to misfire. I have control," Izuku argued, standing up. He held up his gloved hands. "I've been practicing. I can control the rate of entropy. I don't have to destroy everything. You destroy everything you touch." Katsuki spat. He grabbed Izuku's notebook, Hero Analysis for the Future number 13, from the desk. Kaken, give it back! Katsuki didn't blow it up immediately. He held it between his palms. You know what scares me, Deku? It's not that you're weak. It's that you don't know you're a monster. Katsuki detonated his palms. The notebook exploded, charred and smoking. He tossed it out the open window. Don't apply to Yue, Katsuki said, his voice dropping to a whisper. He leaned in, his red eyes burning into Izuku's. If you really want to help people, take a swan dive off the roof and pray for a safe quirk in the next life. He turned and walked away, his friends trailing behind him. Izuku stood there, trembling. The insult stung, but what hurt more was the kernel of truth buried in Katsuki's cruelty. Monster. Was that all he was? A catalyst for ruin? He walked down the stairs, went outside to the koi pond, and fished out his notebook. The fish were nibbling at the burned paper. Stupid Kaken, Izuku whispered, his voice thick with unshed tears. He held the soggy, burned book. He took off his right glove. His hand was pale, the fingers slender. He hovered his hand over the waterlogged book. He focused. He didn't want to destroy it. He wanted to remove the water, entropy, disorder. He focused on the bonds of the water molecules soaking the paper. Separate. Evaporate. Disperse. A faint gray light pulsed from his fingertips. Steam hissed from the notebook. In seconds, the paper was dry. It was brittle, aged 10 years in 10 seconds, yellowed and crinkly, but it was dry. The ink was faded but legible. He put his glove back on. I'm not a monster, he told the fish. They didn't answer. The walk home was a ritual of avoidance. Izuku took the long way, under the overpasses and through the quiet streets, avoiding the crowds where an accidental brush of a hand could lead to a lawsuit. He was muttering to himself, analyzing the encounter, analyzing his chances. If I can get into the support course, maybe I can make better containment gloves. Or if I focus on rescue where I remove debris. He walked into the tunnel under the highway. It was dark, the acoustics amplifying his footsteps. He heard the gurgle behind him too late. A medium-sized invisibility cloak. Izuku spun around. A massive wall of dark green sludge rose from the manhole cover. Two bulging, manic eyes stared down at him. You'll do nicely, kid. Before Izuku could scream, the sludge lunged. It wasn't a solid impact. It was an engulfment. The fluid forced its way into his mouth, his nose, filling his ears. It tasted like sewage and tar. Don't struggle, the villain hissed, the voice vibrating through the liquid. It'll only hurt for about 45 seconds. I just need to hide inside you. Izuku clawed at the fluid. His gloves were slick, finding no purchase. He couldn't breathe. His vision was spotting with black stars. I'm dying. The thought was clinical. Panic flared, hot and bright. No. Not yet. I haven't done anything yet. You're fighting hard, the villain laughed. But you can't grab me. I'm fluid. Fluid. Izuku's mind, even in hypoxia, latched onto the word. Fluid meant molecules held together by weak intermolecular forces. Surface tension. Viscosity. He didn't need to punch. He needed to unmake. Izuku ripped his right glove off with his teeth. He spat the rubber out into the sludge. He thrust his bare hand into the center of the villain's liquid body. Decay. Not the flesh. Not the person. The state of matter. He poured his fear, his desperation, into his fingers. He visualized the water molecules losing their attraction to one another, the chemical bonds of the sludge breaking down into inert gas and dust. Wither. The effect was instantaneous. The villain screamed, not in pain, but in confusion. The sludge around Izuku's hand began to hiss. It turned gray, then white, drying out instantly. The structural integrity of the villain collapsed. The fluid turned to a chalky powder, crumbling away from Izuku's face. Air rushed into Izuku's lungs. He gasped, falling to his knees. The villain was recoiling, half of his body turned to dry flakes. What? What did you do to me? I'm drying out, Izuku coughed, his throat raw. He looked at his hand. He had done it. He hadn't killed him. He had just neutralized the threat. Izuku wheezed. Before the villain could regroup, the manhole cover flew into the air with a deafening clang. Fear not. A massive figure stomped into the tunnel, muscles rippling under a white t-shirt. The pressure in the air changed. For I am here, All Might, the villain shrieked and lunged, desperate. All Might didn't hesitate. Texas smash. The wind pressure alone was enough. The remaining sludge was scattered against the tunnel walls. The villain was knocked unconscious instantly. Izuku sat on the ground, staring. The #1 hero. The symbol of peace. He was right there. All Might stood tall, his signature smile plastered on his face, but his eyes were sharp. He looked at the scattered sludge, then at the pile of gray powder near the boy, and finally at the boy's bare, trembling hand. Young man! All Might boomed, his voice echoing. Are you injured? All Might. Izuku scrambled to put his glove back on, shame flooding him. He hid his hand behind his back. I'm fine. You saved me. All Might gathered the villain into empty soda bottles with blinding speed. Apologies for getting you caught up in my justice ing. This fellow gave me the slip. But you, All Might paused. He picked up a pinch of the gray powder that had once been the villain's body. He rubbed it between his fingers. You have a potent quirk, All Might said. The tone was unreadable. I didn't mean to. Izuku started, terrified he was about to be arrested. You bought yourself time, All Might said, standing up. Good quick thinking. Well, I must take this guy to the police. Wait. All Might. Izuku scrambled up. I have to ask you something. All Might was already crouching, preparing to jump. No time. Evil never sleeps. Can I be a hero? Izuku shouted, grabbing onto All Might's leg just as the hero launched into the air. The rooftop conversation was a blur of revelations. The skeletal form of All Might. The injury. The truth about the symbol of peace. And then, the question, can I be a hero with a quirk that destroys? Izuku asked, his head bowed. Everyone says my power is villainous. That I'm just entropy. All Might looked at the boy. He saw the desperation. But he also remembered the gray powder. He remembered the feeling of death that lingered in that tunnel. Young man, All Might sighed, sitting on the railing. Pro heroes risk their lives every day. But they also risk the lives of others. Some quirks are simply ill-suited for the job. Izuku felt his heart crack. Your power is undeniably strong, All Might continued, his voice gentle but firm. But a hero must save. You disintegrate. If you lose control in a hostage situation, if you trip during a rescue, the consequences are permanent. You cannot unrot a collapsing building. You cannot bring back a civilian turned to dust. All Might stood up. There are other ways to help. The police force. Doctors. They are heroes too. But to stand in the spotlight to be a symbol. I cannot in good conscience tell you that it is possible. It is too dangerous. All Might walked to the door of the roof. It's good to dream, kid. But you have to be realistic. The door clicked shut. Izuku stood alone on the roof. The wind whipped his green hair. He looked at his gloved hands. Realistic. Realistic was entropy. Realistic was the fact that everything dies. I knew it, Izuku whispered. Tears streamed down his face. I always knew it. An explosion rocked the city. Izuku jolted. He had been walking aimlessly, his mind a fog of rejection. He looked up. Smoke was billowing from the shopping district a few blocks away. A villain attack. His feet moved before his brain could stop them. It was habit. It was instinct. When he arrived at the scene, it was chaos. The street was ablaze. Heroes were standing around, helpless. Death Arms, Kamui Woods, Empty Lady, they were all stalled. I can't get close. Death Arms shouted. The explosions are too frequent. Where are the fire trucks? The villain has a hostage. Izuku pushed through the crowd. He needed to see. He needed to take notes, even if he couldn't be a hero. It was all he had left. He reached the police line and looked into the inferno. In the center of the burning alleyway, the sludge villain had reformed. He was larger now, feeding on the chaos. And trapped inside him, thrashing and screaming, was a boy with ash blonde hair. Katsuki? Katsuki was firing explosions wildly, but they were useless. They just created more smoke. The villain was suffocating him, hijacking his quirk to destroy the street. Why aren't they doing anything? Izuku whispered. They can't, a bystander said. The kid's quirk is going off like fireworks. Anyone who gets close gets blown up. Izuku watched Katsuki's eyes. They were wide, filled with terror. The arrogance was gone. He was drowning. He was dying, and the heroes were watching. Realistic. It's too dangerous. You're a monster. Izuku's legs moved. Hey! Kid! Stop! Izuku ducked under the police tape. He didn't have a plan. He didn't have a weapon. He just ran. Deku? Katsuki's choked voice reached him. The villain turned, his eyes narrowing. You again? The brat with the dusty touch. I'll kill you this time. The villain lashed out with a tendril of sludge. Izuku didn't stop. He didn't close his eyes. He watched the attack coming, analyze. The sludge was fast, but it had mass. Izuku slid on his knees across the pavement, ducking under the tendril. The heat was intense. His jacket was singeing. He popped up right in front of the villain. Get out of here! Katsuki gasped. Shut up! Izuku yelled back, tears flying from his eyes. You looked like you needed saving. The villain raised a massive wave of sludge to crush them both. Izuku ripped off both gloves. He threw them at the villain's face as a distraction, then slammed both bare palms onto the villain's main body. He didn't hold back. He didn't try to be gentle. Entropy, accelerated decay. He channeled everything he had. The fear, the rejection, the anger. He pushed it into the sludge. The effect was horrifyingly majestic. From the point of contact, a web of gray cracks shot through the villain's liquid body. The sludge didn't just dry, it aged. The organic compounds broke down into carbon and water vapor instantly. The villain screamed as his body lost cohesion. The sludge turned into a storm of gray ash, swirling in the updraft of the fire. The hold on Katsuki broke. Izuku grabbed Katsuki's collar and yanked him free, throwing him back onto the pavement. You little! The villain, now half the size and rapidly crumbling, tried to reform. Izuku spun around. His eyes were glowing a faint, eerie green. The skin of his arms was veined with black patterns, the toll of using his quirk at maximum output. He reached out. He grabbed the remaining mass of the villain. Stop, Izuku commanded, and the villain stopped. The sludge turned into a statue of dry, gray stone, frozen mid-lunge. Then, it crumbled into a pile of dirt. Silence descended on the alley. The fire still crackled, but the explosions had stopped. Izuku stood amidst the ash, breathing heavy, his hands bare and shaking. He looked at the pile of dirt that used to be a living threat. Did I kill him? Panic seized him. He fell to his knees, digging into the dirt. No, no, no. He's alive, a deep voice rumbled. All Might emerged from the smoke, steam rising from his skin. He had arrived just a second too late to intervene, but in time to see. He is merely separated, All Might said, looking at the pile with a mixture of shock and awe. You broke the medium holding him together. His consciousness is likely dormant in the remnants. Izuku slumped forward, his forehead touching the asphalt. I didn't want to hurt him. You didn't, All Might said softly. Then the prose descended. Are you insane? Kamui shouted, grabbing Izuku by the shoulder. You rushed into a fire zone. You're a middle schooler. That quirk is lethal. Death Arms yelled. Look at this mess. You turned the villain to dust. What if you had touched the hostage? You could have killed him. They berated him. They scolded him for his recklessness, for the danger of his power. They treated him like a bomb that had luckily failed to detonate properly. Izuku took it. He nodded, mumbled apologies, and stared at his hands. Meanwhile, the press praised Katsuki for his bravery and his powerful quirk. Sunset. Izuku walked home alone, exhausted. His hands were raw, wrapped in bandages from his emergency kit. He had lost his gloves. Deku! Izuku stopped. He didn't turn around. Footsteps pounded behind him. Katsuki stopped a few yards away, panting. I didn't ask for your help, Katsuki snarled. He was hunched over, his pride bruised but his body intact. I know, Izuku said quietly. And you didn't save me. Katsuki yelled, his voice cracking. I was fine. I would have gotten out. Okay, Kaken. Katsuki grit his teeth. He looked at Izuku's back. He had felt it. In that fire, when Izuku had touched the sludge, Katsuki had felt the wave of cold death pass inches from his face. It was the most terrifying thing he had ever experienced, and Izuku had controlled it. He had shaved the villain away from Katsuki's skin with the precision of a surgeon. But Katsuki looked down. You didn't turn me to dust. So, whatever? He turned and stomped away, angry at the debt he now owed. Izuku sighed. He continued walking. He just wanted to go home and sleep. I am here. All Might burst around the corner, sliding to a stop in a dramatic pose. All Might? Izuku jumped back. Why are you here? You were surrounded by reporters. I shook them off. All Might coughed, transforming back into his skeletal form in a puff of steam. He wiped blood from his chin. Young man. I have a correction to make. A correction? On the roof, All Might said, stepping closer. I told you that you needed to be realistic. I told you that your power was too dangerous. Izuku gripped his bag strap. You were right. The heroes, they were mad. I almost killed him, but you didn't, All Might said. His blue eyes pierced through the gloom. In that moment, everyone else hesitated. The professionals, with all their training, held back because they considered the risk. You didn't. All Might placed a hand on his chest. You saw a life in danger, and your legs moved on their own. That is the fundamental principle of a hero. Izuku looked up, his eyes widening. And more than that, All Might said, his voice dropping to a serious, heavy tone. I watched you. You wield a power that brings ruin. Entropy. Decay. It is a terrifying ability. But in that fire, you used it to save. You turned a weapon of mass destruction into a scalpel. All Might smiled. It wasn't the showy smile for the cameras. It was small, genuine, and kind. I was wrong, Izuku Midoriya. The world is full of threats that cannot be punched away. Sometimes, to save something, you have to destroy the thing that threatens it. Izuku's knees gave out. He collapsed onto the pavement, clutching his chest. The dam broke. He sobbed ugly, heaving sobs that shook his entire body. You can be a hero, All Might declared. He reached out a hand. However, All Might added, his tone shifting. I cannot give you my power. Izuku sniffled, looking up through his tears. Huh, my power, one for all, is a stockpiling of energy. If I gave it to you, combined with your entropy. All Might shuddered. You might accidentally rot the fabric of reality. It's too volatile. Izuku blinked. Oh, but... All Might pointed a finger at him. I can give you something else. I can teach you. I can train you to control that deadly touch of yours. You have the heart of a hero, young man. Now we just need to make sure your hands don't accidentally end the world. All Might grinned. Welcome to your hero academia. Izuku looked at his hands, the hands that ruined, the hands that withered. For the first time, they didn't look like cursed things. They looked like tools. Yes, sir! Izuku cried out. And somewhere in the shadows of the city, in a dimly lit bar, a man with pale blue hair and a hand covering his face watched the news report of the sludge incident. He watched the green-haired boy turn the villain to dust. Tomura Shigaraki scratched at his neck, his skin flaking away. Cheater, he whispered, his eyes filled with a dark, jealous hate. He's a cheater. The police interrogation room was painted a sterile, headache-inducing white. It smelled of stale coffee and that specific, sharp antiseptic scent used to mask the smell of unwashed criminals. Izuku Midoriya sat on a metal chair, his hands resting on the table. They were bare. His gloves had been incinerated in the fire, and the police had yet to provide him with replacements. Across from him sat Detective Tsukachi. The man looked kind, his eyes tired and lined with the stress of 1,000 late nights, but he kept his distance. There was a solid 2 feet of empty table between them, and Tsukachi's hands were tucked safely in his lap. So, Tsukachi said, glancing down at the file in front of him. The paper was stamped with a bright red triangle. Warning, Class A hazardous emitter. Let me get this straight. You saw the villain, you saw the hostage, and you ran in? Yes, sir, Izuku whispered. He felt small. The adrenaline of the fight had long since faded, leaving him shivering and acutely aware of the dryness in his skin. And you used your quirk, Tsukachi continued, his voice neutral. Quirk name, entropy. Type emitter. Effect, accelerated molecular breakdown of organic and inorganic matter. I had to, Izuku said, his voice hitching. Kaken, Bakugu, he couldn't breathe. The heroes weren't moving. I had to stop the sludge. Tsukachi sighed, rubbing his temples. Midoriya-kun, do you know what the survival rate is for civilians who are touched by a quirk like yours in a high-stress environment? Izuku looked down. 0? Usually, yes. It's a miracle you didn't dust the hostage along with the villain. The cleanup crew is still sweeping up the villain's remains from the asphalt. They have to rehydrate him in a secure facility just to book him. The door opened. A police officer stepped in, holding a pair of thick, industrial-grade containment mitts. They looked like something a bomb disposal unit would wear, heavy, gray, and ugly. Put these on, kid, the officer said, tossing them onto the table. He didn't hand them to Izuku directly. Izuku pulled the mitts on. They were stiff and smelled of new rubber. They went all the way up to his elbows. As soon as his skin was covered, the tension in the room visibly dropped. Tsukachi relaxed his shoulders. You're not in trouble for saving him, Tsukachi said softly. But the law is the law. Public quirk usage is a felony. However, considering the villain was a fugitive and All Might has already given a statement praising your surgical precision, we're letting you off with a warning. Tsukachi leaned forward. But listen to me, Midoriya. You are listed as hazardous material. That's not just a category, it's a warning label for the world. You have the power to turn a city block into a sandbox. If you want to be a part of society, you have to prove you're the containment unit, not the bomb. Do you understand? I understand, Izuku said. Good. Your mother is waiting outside. The ride home was silent. Inko Midoriya drove with white-knuckled grip on the steering wheel. Every time the car went over a bump, she glanced at Izuku in the passenger seat, eyeing the massive gray mitts resting on his knees. She didn't yell. Inko never yelled. That was the worst part. When they got into the apartment, she locked the door and immediately went to the kitchen. She started making tea. It was a nervous habit. Mom, Izuku said, standing in the hallway. I'm sorry. Inko froze. The kettle began to whistle, a high, lonely sound. She turned off the stove but didn't pour the water. I saw the news, she said, her voice trembling. The helicopter footage. I saw you touch that monster and he just fell apart, Izuku. He turned to Ash. She turned around. Her eyes were swimming with tears. I'm so proud that you're brave. I am. But I'm so terrified. What if you had tripped? What if you had touched Katsuki? You would be a murderer, Izuku. My baby would be a murderer. I didn't though, Izuku pleaded, stepping forward. I controlled it. All Might said. All Might isn't your mother. Inko cried out. She rushed forward and hugged him, burying her face in his chest. She was careful, so careful, to wrap her arms around his back, avoiding his gloved arms entirely. I just want you to be safe. I want you to have a soft life. Why does your power have to be so hard? Izuku stood there, the heavy rubber mitts hovering in the air behind her back, unable to return the embrace properly. He stared at the wall. Because the world isn't soft, Mom. I'm going to be a hero, he whispered into her hair. I'm going to learn to control it. I promise. I'll never hurt anyone who doesn't need to be stopped. Inko cried harder. She didn't say she believed him. She just held him, mourning the innocence that had turned to dust the moment he stepped into that fire. Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. 6 a.m. The place was a graveyard. It was a stretch of coastline that had been abandoned by the city, a dumping ground for the unwanted refuse of the last 20 years. Tires, rusted cars, broken appliances, driftwood, and mountains of plastic choked the sand. It smelled of brine, rust, and neglect. It was the perfect kingdom for a king of ruin. Izuku stood at the top of the stairs leading down to the sand. He was wearing a dark green tracksuit and his new hazmat gloves. The wind whipped his hair back. Eat this, Izuku jumped, spinning around. All Might stood there in his skeletal form, holding a bento box. He blinked. Ah. Wrong line. I meant to say, good morning, All Might. Izuku bowed low. Good morning. I'm ready. All Might chuckled, blood spurting slightly from his mouth. He wiped it away casually. Enthusiasm. Good. You'll need it. Because this. He gestured grandly to the trash heap. Is your classroom. The trash? The trash. All Might walked down the stairs, his oversized yellow suit hanging loosely on his emaciated frame. Young Midoriya, let's talk physics. Your quirk, entropy, is the acceleration of disorder. You break bonds. You disperse energy. But do you know how you do it? Izuku pulled out a fresh notebook. Dr. Tsubasa said it's a psychosomatic field. I emit a frequency that destabilizes atomic cohesion. It requires contact because the field dissipates instantly in air. Technobabble. All Might waved his hand dismissively. Think of it like this, you are a conduit. You tell the object that its time is up. But right now you are a sledgehammer. You see a villain, you scream die, and the villain turns to dust. I didn't scream die. Metaphorically. The issue is binary. On or off. Life or death. All Might kicked an old, rusted washing machine. It clanged dully. A hero cannot be binary. Sometimes you need to break the gun, not the hand. Sometimes you need to rust the lock, not the door. Sometimes you need to weaken the floor, not the building. All Might turned to him, his eyes sharp blue flames in the shadows of his sockets. This beach is full of complex structures. Different materials. Metal, plastic, rubber, wood, glass. Your goal for the next 10 months is not to clean the beach. Izuku blinked. It's not, no. Anyone can clean a beach with a truck. Your goal is to dismantle it. All Might patted the washing machine. Take this. I don't want you to turn it to dust. I want you to separate the plastic buttons from the metal frame. I want you to rust the bolts so they fall out, but keep the panels intact. I want you to strip the paint without damaging the steel. Izuku stared at the washing machine. It seemed like an impossible task. His power felt like a flood. All Might was asking him to use it like a dripping faucet. If you turn it to dust, All Might warned, you fail. If you destroy the wrong part, you fail. You must learn to listen to the materials. You must become a master of decay, not a slave to it. All Might pulled out a piece of paper. I have designed a training plan. It is intense. It combines heavy lifting to build your vessel, because a strong quirk needs a strong body, with precision entropy training. We have 10 months until the UA entrance exam. By the time you walk through those gates, I want you to be able to decay the shell off a hard-boiled egg without cracking the white. Izuku took the paper. It was titled The American Dream Plan, Hazard Edition. He looked at the mountain of trash. He looked at his gloved hands. I'll do it, Izuku said. The fire from the incident was still burning in his gut. I'll do it all. Month 1, the blunt instrument. The first month was hell. Physical conditioning was one thing. Izuku was used to pain. He had been bullied for a decade. Doing squats with a safe full of old magazines on his back was grueling, but simple. The quirk training was where the tears came. Izuku sat in the sand, surrounded by a pile of gray dust. In the center of the dust was what used to be a bicycle. Again, All Might said. He was sitting on a fridge, reading a comic book. I can't, Izuku panted, sweat dripping from his nose. As soon as I touch it, it wants to go. It feels like the materials want to break down. It's like holding back a dam. That is the temptation of entropy, All Might said, not looking up. Chaos is the natural state of the universe. Order requires energy. Maintaining the shape of a bicycle requires energy. Your quirk releases that tension. You are letting the object relax into oblivion. You must tell it to relax only a little bit. Izuku gritted his teeth. He reached out to a rusted pipe. He focused. Just the rust. Just the oxidation. Eat the oxygen, leave the iron. He touched it. Crack. The pipe shattered into 1,000 flakes of iron oxide. Too much, All Might critiqued. You took the structural integrity with the rust. Try again. day after day. Touch, crumble, fail. Touch, crumble, fail. Izuku's hands ached. Not muscular ache, but a deep, throbbing vibration in his bones. Using his quirk this much felt like running a high current through a thin wire. His veins turned dark, black lines tracing up his forearms like spiderwebs. Inko noticed. She bought him compression sleeves to hide the marks. She cooked him extra iron-rich meals, suspecting, correctly, that his quirk consumed his body's resources to fuel the decay. At school, the isolation deepened. Katsuki hadn't spoken a word to him since the incident. He didn't look at him. If Izuku walked down the hallway, Katsuki would stop, wait for him to pass, and then continue. It wasn't fear anymore. It was a cold, simmering avoidance. The other students followed suit. Izuku Midoriya wasn't the class punching bag anymore. He was the unexploded ordnance in the corner. One day, during lunch, a brave first-year accidentally bumped into Izuku in the cafeteria. The boy dropped his tray. "I'm so sorry," the boy squeaked, looking at Izuku's gloved hands with wide, terrified eyes. Izuku instinctively reached out to help him pick up the tray. "It's okay, let me, don't touch it," the boy screamed, scrambling back. The cafeteria went silent. Everyone watched. Izuku froze, his hand hovering over a spilled bowl of curry. He slowly pulled his hand back. "Right," Izuku whispered. "Sorry." He walked away, leaving his lunch. He went to the library, hid in the back, and read books on metallurgy and chemical bonds. If they wouldn't treat him like a human, he would study like a machine. Month 3, the rust bloom. It happened on a rainy Tuesday. The rain made the beach miserable. The trash was slippery, and the smell was worse. Izuku was trying to dismantle a microwave. "Focus," Izuku muttered to himself. The rain plastered his hair to his skull. "The screws. They are steel. The casing is aluminum. Different decay rates." He placed his finger on the screw head. "Don't destroy." Age. He visualized the passage of time. 10 years. 20 years. He felt the hum in his finger. It was lower this time, a bass note rather than a screech. The screw head turned brown. Flakes of rust peeled away. The metal shrank slightly as the oxidation ate the surface. Izuku stopped. The screw was rusted, but the aluminum casing around it was pristine. He grabbed a screwdriver and twisted. The rusted screw crumbled under the torque, the head snapping off cleanly. The casing popped open. "I did it!" Izuku yelled, holding up the back panel of the microwave. "All Might! I did it!" All Might popped out from behind a pile of tires. "Yes. Precision! You targeted the ferrous material and ignored the non-ferrous. Excellent! It's not just holding back," Izuku realized, staring at his hand. "It's targeting. I have to know the material. I have to know what I'm killing." From that day, the training shifted. Izuku became a student of composition. He memorized the melting points, the chemical structures, and the decay rates of everything. Wood, plastic, glass, bone. He learned that glass doesn't decay, it flows. He could make glass brittle, or he could make it cloud over with 1,000,000 microfractures, turning a window opaque instantly. He learned that plastic doesn't rot, it becomes brittle and shatters. He learned that wood was easy. Organic matter was always eager to return to the earth. He named his techniques. Rust bloom, targeting joints and hinges to seize machinery. Dry rot, instantly sapping moisture from wood or fabric to make it crumble. Stress fracture, finding the weak point in a structure and aging it until it snaps under its own weight. He was no longer a blunt instrument. He was becoming a scalpel of ruin. Month 6, the physical price. The beach was halfway clear. The sun was setting, casting long, orange shadows across the sand. Izuku was shirtless, hauling a massive truck tire on his shoulders. His muscles were defined now, corded and tight. The baby fat was gone, burned away by the grueling regimen. But there was something else. His skin was paler. Using entropy constantly was changing him. It was as if his body was adapting to the proximity of the void. His hair seemed darker, the green losing its shine. His eyes, once wide and innocent, had developed a sharpness. He blinked less. All Might noticed it. "Young Midoriya, take a break," All Might said, frowning. I can keep going, Izuku grunted, dropping the tire. It landed with a thud. You are pale. And your hands? Izuku looked at his hands. Even when not using his quirk, the tips of his fingers were a faint, dusty gray. The pigment was fading. It's fine, Izuku said, flexing his fingers. It's just residue. I'm fine. You are pushing too hard, All Might warned. Remember, the goal is to enter UA, not to kill yourself before you get there. I have to push. Izuku snapped. He froze. He had never raised his voice at All Might before. I mean. Izuku looked down, shame coloring his cheeks. Everyone else has quirks that build, or shoot, or strengthen. They create energy. I just take it away. If I'm not the strongest, if I'm not the fastest, then I'm just a villain with a badge. I have to be perfect, All Might. If I make one mistake, people die. All Might walked over and placed a heavy hand on Izuku's shoulder. You are not a villain, All Might said firmly. You are a young man carrying a heavy burden. But look around you. He gestured to the beach. Where there had been mountains of trash, there was now clean, golden sand. The water lapped at the shore, clear and free of debris. You destroyed the trash, All Might said. And by doing so, you saved the beach. You brought the beauty back. Destruction is not evil, Izuku. It is a part of the cycle. Without winter there is no spring. You are the winter. You are the winter. Izuku looked at the clean sand. He felt a lump in his throat. Okay, he whispered. I'll take a break. Month 9, the impossible object. There was one object left on the beach. It was a rusted, stripped chassis of a delivery truck. It was half buried in the sand, heavy, awkward, and massive. The final test, All Might said, standing on the promenade. Move that truck to the collection point at the road. You cannot drag it. The friction is too great. You cannot lift it. It is too heavy for you currently. You must use your quirk. Izuku stared at the truck. It was a beast of iron and rust. If I decay the whole thing, I fail, Izuku muttered. Because we need to recycle the metal. Correct. Izuku walked up to the truck. He walked around it. He touched the cold metal. Analyze. It was too heavy. To move it, he needed to make it lighter. Or he needed to make it roll. But there were no wheels. He placed his hands on the rear axle. Wither, he whispered. He didn't destroy the axle. He targeted the surface of the metal where it touched the sand. He turned the bottom layer of the chassis into a fine, graphite-like powder. A lubricant. He moved to the front. He did the same. Then, he went to the body of the truck. It was thick steel. Selective decay, internal structure. He pushed his awareness into the metal. This was the hardest technique he had developed. Instead of rotting the surface, he targeted the honeycomb structure of the steel crystals inside. He introduced microvoids. He was essentially turning the solid steel into a metal foam. He kept the outer shell hard, but hollowed out the density. Sweat poured down his face. His nose began to bleed. The black veins on his arms pulsed violently. Lighter. Make it lighter. Eat the mass, keep the form. The truck groaned. It didn't collapse, but it settled. Izuku stepped back, gasping for air. He wiped the blood from his nose with his forearm. He walked to the back of the truck. He braced his shoulder against the bumper. 1, 2. Heave, he pushed. His legs strained, digging into the sand. The truck, which should have weighed 2 tons, groaned and slid. The graphite powder beneath it acted as a sled. The hollowed-out frame was half the weight. Slowly, agonizingly, the truck began to move. Izuku roared, a primal sound of effort. He pushed it 10 feet. 20 feet. Up the slight incline of the dunes. He didn't stop until he pushed it all the way to the asphalt of the road. He collapsed. All Might stared, his jaw dropped. He looked at the truck. He tapped the metal. It sounded hollow, like a tin can, but it held its shape. He altered the density without compromising the external geometry, All Might whispered. That's terrifying. Izuku lay on his back, staring at the blue sky. He was exhausted. He felt like his bones were made of lead. Did I pass? He wheezed. All Might grinned, shifting into his muscle form. Young Midoriya. You didn't just pass. You rewrote the textbook. The morning of the exam, 10 months, Izuku stood in front of his mirror. The boy staring back was different. His uniform fit tighter around the shoulders. His jaw was sharper. But the biggest change was his hands. Inko had saved up. She had gone to a specialized support gear company. Lying on his bed were a pair of new gloves. They weren't the ugly, yellow kitchen gloves, and they weren't the bulky industrial mitts. They were sleek. Black leather reinforced with a weave of lead and tungsten fibers. They had open fingertips, but each finger had a small, retractable hood, like a camera shutter, that could snap over the skin. Control. Izuku pulled them on. They fit perfectly. He flexed his fingers. The little hoods clicked open, revealing his fingertips. He clicked them shut. Safe. He grabbed his yellow backpack. Izuku? Inko called from the kitchen. He walked out. Inko looked at him. She didn't cry this time. She looked at his hands, encased in the sleek black gloves. She looked at the determination in his eyes. You look. She paused. You look ready. I am, Izuku said. He walked to the door. Izuku! He turned back. Inko took a deep breath. Don't let them tell you who you are. You save people. That's what you do, Izuku smiled. It was a small, sharp smile. I know, Mom. I'll save them. UA High School gates. The building was massive. The H-shaped glass structure reflected the morning sun. Hundreds of students were walking toward the entrance. Izuku walked with a steady rhythm. He wasn't muttering. He wasn't shaking. He saw Katsuki walking ahead of him. Katsuki sensed him. He stopped and turned around. His red eyes narrowed. He looked at Izuku's new build. He looked at the black gloves. So, Katsuki said, his voice low. You didn't take a swan dive. No, Izuku said calmly. I decided to climb instead. Katsuki scoffed. Don't get in my way, Deku. Unless you want to turn to dust. I don't turn things to dust anymore, Kaken, Izuku said, walking past him. I just clear the path. He brushed past Katsuki's shoulder. Katsuki flinched. Just a little. Izuku kept walking. He didn't trip. He didn't fall. He reached the main courtyard. A girl with brown hair was walking in front of him. She tripped over her own feet, beginning to fall. Izuku's hand shot out. Old instinct, don't touch. You'll kill her. New instinct, control. His hand grabbed her backpack strap. He pulled, steadying her. His fingers were covered by the caps. He didn't activate his quirk. He just used his muscle. The girl regained her balance. She spun around. Whoa! Thanks. I almost ate pavement. She looked at him. She looked at his gloves. She didn't scream. She smiled. You're strong. Good luck on the exam. You too, Izuku said. She ran off. Izuku looked at his hand. He had touched someone. And she was fine. He clenched his fist. The sensation of power was there, humming beneath the leather, a sleeping dragon waiting for his command. He looked up at the UA building. I am here, he whispered to himself. The entrance exam was about to begin. And Izuku Midoriya was bringing the decay. The history of power is written in accumulation. One man builds a wall, the next adds a tower, the third adds a cannon. This is the nature of society, and it was the nature of One for All. A torch passed from hand to hand, growing brighter, hotter, and heavier with each generation. Toshinori Yagi, known to the world as All Might, sat on the hood of a rusted pickup truck at Dagoba Beach. The sun had long since set, leaving the coastline bathed in the silver-blue light of a half-moon. The ocean whispered against the shore, a rhythmic hushing sound that usually brought him peace. Tonight, it brought only turmoil. 10 yards away, Izuku Midoriya was practicing. The boy was a blur of motion in the dim light. He wasn't lifting weights tonight. He was moving through a labyrinth of piled scrap metal that All Might had arranged, a maze of jagged edges, unstable footings, and hanging wires. Izuku moved like a ghost. He vaulted over a washing machine, ducked under a crane arm, and slid across the hood of a sedan. He didn't touch anything he didn't intend to. When he did touch, it was a whisper, a tap on a padlock to rust the shackle instantly, allowing a gate to swing open. A brush against a protruding rebar spike to blunt the tip so it wouldn't snag his clothes. He was precise. He was deadly. He was ready, and that was the problem. All Might looked at his own hand. He summoned the embers of One for All. The power hummed, a golden warmth that felt like life itself. It was the power to smash, to save, to change the weather with a punch. If I give this to him, All Might thought, watching the green lightning of Izuku's own quirk flicker in the dark. What happens when you pour infinite energy into a vessel made to decompose existence? He feared the answer wasn't a hero. He feared the answer was a black hole. Time! All Might called out. Izuku skidded to a halt. He was breathing hard, his breath misting in the cool night air. He wore a compression shirt that clung to his new muscles, and his eyes, once soft and watery, were sharp, scanning the environment for threats. 32 seconds, Izuku said, checking his watch. That's a personal best through the obstacle course. Indeed, All Might said. He slid off the truck. He landed with a heavy thud, his skeletal form looking fragile in the moonlight. Come here, my boy. We need to talk. The tone was different. It wasn't the boisterous mentor tone, nor the stern coach tone. It was the voice of a man carrying a regret he hadn't yet voiced. Izuku stiffened. He walked over, wiping sweat from his forehead with the back of his wrist. Is something wrong? Did I mess up the decay ratio on the padlock? No. Your control is impeccable. Better than I ever dared to hope. All Might gestured to the cooler. Sit. Hydrate. Izuku sat on the sand. He took a bottle of water, cracked the seal, and drank. He watched All Might pace back and forth. Young Midoriya, All Might began, stopping to look at the ocean. Do you remember what I told you on the roof? About my quirk? Yes, Izuku nodded. One for all. The cultivation of power passed down to defeat all for one. Correct. And I told you that I was looking for a successor. All Might turned around. His eyes were shadowed. For the last 8 months I have watched you. You have the heart of a hero. You have the drive. You have the spirit of self-sacrifice that is the prerequisite for this power. Izuku's heart hammered in his chest. This was it. The moment. He set the water bottle down, his hands trembling slightly. But All Might said, the word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. I cannot give you One for All. The silence that followed was louder than the ocean. It was a vacuum, sucking the air out of Izuku's lungs. He blinked once, twice. The hope that had been quietly building in his chest, the hope of having a heroic power to balance his villainous one, shattered. I don't understand, Izuku whispered. Is it because I'm not strong enough yet? I can work harder. I can. No, All Might cut in, crouching down so he was eye level with the boy. It is not a lack of merit. It is a matter of physics. And safety. All Might pointed a bony finger at Izuku's chest. Your quirk, entropy, is an emitter type of extreme potency. It breaks down molecular bonds. It feeds on energy, your stamina, the ambient heat, the chemical potential of the object. It is a hunger. All Might took a deep breath. One for All is a stockpile of power. It boosts the user's physical abilities, yes. But it also interacts with the user's original quirk. If you were quirkless, like I was, you would be an empty glass waiting to be filled. But you are not empty. You are a vessel filled with a corrosive acid. All Might looked genuinely afraid. If I pour One for All into you, I fear it will not just boost your strength. It will boost entropy. Imagine your decay, but amplified by the stockpiled power of 8 generations. You wouldn't just rust a lock. You might dissolve the atmosphere around you. You might sink the entire island of Japan into the sea with a single touch. Or worse, the power might be too volatile. It could kill you the moment you swallow the DNA. Izuku stared at his hands. He imagined it. The hum of decay turning into a roar. The control he had fought so hard for, the scalpel, turning into a nuclear bomb. So, Izuku's voice cracked. I'm too dangerous? You are incompatible, All Might corrected gently. And I cannot risk your life, nor the safety of the world, on a gamble. Izuku lowered his head. He pulled his knees to his chest. It felt like the doctor's office all over again. You should give up. It's hazardous. You can't be a hero. All Might watched him, his heart breaking. He had grown fond of the boy. He wanted to give him the world. But he had to be the adult. He had to be responsible. I'm sorry, Izuku, All Might whispered. For a long minute, Izuku didn't move. He sat there, letting the rejection wash over him. He felt the familiar sting of tears, but he bit his lip until he tasted blood. He forced them back. He thought about the sludge villain. He thought about the fire. He thought about the truck he had pushed yesterday. He looked at his hands. The gray, faded fingertips. You're wrong, Izuku said. All Might blinked. Excuse me? Izuku stood up. He wasn't crying. His eyes were dry, and they burned with a cold, green fire. You're wrong about me needing it. Izuku walked over to the rusted pickup truck. He placed his hand on the hood. All my life, people told me this power was evil. That it was death. And for a long time, I wanted to be you. I wanted to be the sun. I wanted to punch the clouds away and make people smile. Izuku. But I'm not the sun, Izuku continued, his voice strengthening. And that's okay. Because when the sun is too bright, people get burned. When the debris is trapping them, the sun doesn't help. They need someone to remove the weight. Izuku looked at All Might. A surgeon cuts flesh to save the patient. A firefighter breaks down a door to save the family. You're scared that my power is a disease. But it's not. It's a scalpel. And a scalpel doesn't need to be a sledgehammer. He clenched his fist, pulling it away from the truck. I don't need one for all to be a hero. I don't need to punch harder. I just need to be fast enough to touch them before they hurt anyone. If I can't be the symbol of peace, then I'll be the symbol of consequences. All Might stared at the boy. He expected devastation. He expected begging. Instead, he saw a resolve that terrified him and inspired him in equal measure. Izuku wasn't asking for permission anymore. He was stating a fact. I'm going to UA, Izuku said firmly. And I'm going to do it with my power. I'll show you. I'll show everyone that ruin can be a rescue. All Might stood up slowly. He felt a smile tugging at his lips, not the practiced smile of the hero, but a genuine grin of respect. The symbol of consequences, All Might mused. It lacks the ring of peace, but it suits you. All Might extended his hand. Very well, Izuku Midoriya. I won't give you my power. But I will give you everything else. My knowledge, my tactics, my experience. If you are to walk this path alone, without the safety net of super strength, then you must be perfect. You must be untouchable. Izuku grasped All Might's hand. He was careful to keep his fingers raised, palm to palm, ensuring no decay leaked through. I will be, Izuku promised. The training changed after that night. Before, there was an underlying assumption that Izuku was preparing his body to receive a massive influx of power. He was building a container. Now, he was sharpening a blade. If he couldn't rely on the overwhelming durability and force of One for All, he had to rely on evasion and lethality. He couldn't trade blows with a villain. One punch from a guy like Muscular would turn Izuku into paste. He had to be a ghost. Speed! All Might shouted, blowing a whistle. Don't block. Never block. If you block, you die. Izuku sprinted across the sand. All Might, in his muscle form, threw high-velocity tennis balls at him. Dodge. Weave. Izuku twisted his body, dropping into a slide. He didn't just run. He used his quirk on the environment. As he planted his foot to pivot, he tapped the sand with 2 fingers. Fusion Decay. He broke down the silica bonds just enough to turn the sand into a slippery glass dust slurry for a fraction of a second, reducing friction to 0. He skated across the beach, moving faster than his legs should have allowed. Good! All Might roared. Again. Close the distance. Izuku recovered from the slide, launching himself forward. He approached a concrete barrier. Instead of vaulting it, he slapped it. Structural integrity, 0%. The concrete turned to dust instantly in a tunnel the shape of his body. He ran through the wall, exploding out the other side in a cloud of gray smoke. Terror! All Might shouted, though he sounded proud. Use the fear! A villain sees a boy. Show them the Reaper. Izuku emerged from the dust, his eyes locked on the target dummy. He didn't punch it. He rushed past it, trailing his hand along its torso. He stopped 10 feet past it. Behind him, the dummy fell apart. It didn't explode. It simply disassembled, the bolts rusted to nothing, the wood rotted to mulch. Time. Izuku collapsed, heaving for air. Better, All Might said, looking at the stopwatch. But the Yui robots will be faster. And they won't feel fear. You have to be colder, Izuku. You have to analyze the weak point and strike it in the first millisecond. I know, Izuku wheezed, looking at his hands. The tips of his gloves were worn down. I need to be faster. Then let's work on your legs. Parkour. Verticality. If you can't be hit, you can't lose. The day of the exam, the transition from the grime of Dagoba Beach to the pristine halls of UA High School was jarring. Izuku sat in the massive auditorium, surrounded by hundreds of other hopefuls. The air buzzed with nervous energy. To his left, a boy with yellow hair and a black lightning bolt streak was shaking his leg uncontrollably. To his right, a girl with earphone jacks hanging from her ears was looking coolly indifferent. And a few rows down, Katsuki Bakugo sat with his arms crossed, radiating a murderous aura that kept the seats on either side of him empty. Izuku kept his head down. He was writing in a small notebook, muttering under his breath. Written exam went well. Physics questions were standard. History was a bit tricky, but I studied the era of chaos thoroughly. Now, the practical. Welcome to the show, listeners. Present Mick's voice boomed through the speakers, amplified to an ear-splitting volume. The pro hero stood on the stage, bathed in spotlights. Everybody say hey. Silence. Tough crowd. All right, let's get down to business. You've got 10 minutes to wreak havoc in our simulated cityscapes. You can bring whatever gear you want, as long as it's registered. I see some of you are strapped up. Izuku subconsciously touched the cuffs of his gloves. He had registered them as safety/containment equipment. They were the only thing standing between him and a lawsuit. There are 3 types of faux villains in every battle center. President Mike shouted, the screen behind him displaying silhouettes of robots. 1-pointer. 2-pointer. 3-pointer. The more trouble they are, the more points you get. Destroy them, disable them, incapacitate them. Show us what you got. Izuku narrowed his eyes. Robots. Metal. Wiring. Hydraulics. My quirk is effective against all of them. But the issue is energy conservation. If I rust a whole robot, it takes a lot out of me. I need to target the power sources or the joints. Excuse me. May I ask a question? A hand shot up in the middle of the auditorium. A tall boy with glasses and blue hair stood up, stiff as a board. Spotlight swung to him. Shoot, listener. On the printout, there are 4 types of villains listed. If this is a misprint, then UA, the most prestigious school in Japan, should be ashamed of such a foolish error. We are here to be molded into exemplary heroes. The boy spun around and pointed a finger directly at Izuku. And you! With the curly hair, Izuku jumped, nearly dropping his notebook. And me? You've been muttering this entire time. It's distracting. If you're here on a sightseeing trip to interrupt serious students, then you should leave immediately. The auditorium rippled with snickers. Izuku felt his face burn. He sank lower in his seat. Sorry, he whispered. Okay. Examinee 7111, thanks for the segue. President Mike waved his hands. The 4th villain is worth 0 points. That's just a gimmick. A thrasher. An obstacle. Think of it like a video game trap. It's there to mess you up. There's one in every center. My advice? Run away, Izuku thought. The 0-pointer. An obstacle. He looked at the silhouette on the screen. It was massive. It's huge. Which means it's heavy. Which means if the ground becomes unstable. Izuku shook his head. No. Focus on the points. Speed and precision.